morning. Thank you so much for joining us today for the 10th Annual Higher Ed Summit. We made it 10 years. Congratulations. It is my honor to introduce Chancellor Mike Duffey with us today. He's providing our opening keynote, and we will have a brief welcome after he provides remarks, but just wanted to get our day started, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. First, a little bit about me. I live in Worthington, Ohio. My wife, Lindsay, is an elementary school librarian. I grew up the son of a Columbus Public Schools teacher who was first a school counselor, language literacy, and then adult education at North High School in Arcadia. When I was in college, I did AmeriCorps, tutoring students K through 3, reading, writing, arithmetic. I was bribing them with Pokemon cards. I didn't realize at the time how much a Charizard was worth, so I gave it away to some third grader. But it was a great experience and really kind of set me on the path in a way that is a gravity that you try to but the apple falls so close to the tree. I didn't think that I was going to end up in higher education. Some of you know my background. I was in the legislature for 8 years. I helped save the Columbus Crew. I'm very proud of that. But I chaired the Higher Education Committee in the legislature, and then eventually when Governor DeWine became the governor, I got invited over to the department as Senior Vice Chancellor, and I worked on a lot of different policy issues over the years. One of those was discovering that student teachers couldn't be paid while they were student teaching in Ohio. When we found that in the revised code before the last budget, we said, this doesn't really make sense. We should delete this. Who's going to be against it? And nobody was against it, surprisingly. No associations came out of the woodwork and told us that they were against it. So we got that done. So that's just a little bit about me as background, but I want to thank Director Kara Wente from the Department of Children and Youth. She's the one that invited me here today. I want to thank Judith and everyone for hosting today. I'm glad to be with you. I was talking to Steve Dakin we just had the Governor's Cabinet retreat. We were in Shawnee State Park in Southern Ohio. We were talking about early literacy. We were talking about the effect on GDP. And if you think about everything that we're doing, it's really about the American dream. And that is the idea of economic mobility. Can I do it just a little bit better than my parents? And I think about that often now. My parents have passed away. My mother's passed away when I was elected to the legislature. But I think, am I living up to her standard? Can I do a little bit better? Can I leave the world a little bit better for my kids? And there are numerous studies out there that show that if literacy improves 1%, GDP will improve between 1.5% and 3% for that overall economy. There's a very strong correlation between literacy overall, even with adults, of course with adults, and with overall productivity for a nation. So then you start to say, okay, well, how do I work in higher education backwards? And obviously the tip of the spear is early childhood. So we talk about wanting more students to go to college. I can give you bad news about college in Ohio right now, which is 53% of Ohio high schoolers choose to go to college now. Does anybody want to guess what it is nationally? 62%. But it did used to be closer to 70%. It was 68% nationally, and it became 62%. In Ohio, we went from 62 to 53%. So we have an attitude problem. We have a readiness problem. And the joke in education is that, just blame the one before you, right? So I say, Dakin, it's your fault. You're not sending enough college students to the colleges in Ohio. This is the problem. He looks down at the early grades and starts to think about literacy. Then we start to think about pre-K and early ed. So you really are the tip of the spear of where we want to go. And Ohio wants to compete and win against other states. That's what the legislature thinks about all the time. We want to beat Indiana. We want to beat Michigan. We want to beat Florida. And just like vaccinations work for society as a whole and not just for individuals, if we can raise median income and we can raise economic mobility for all of Ohio, it supports individuals, and if we can raise it for individuals, it supports all of Ohio. So we are talking about the American dream, and we're talking about who should have access to the American dream. And that's everyone, and that includes those who work in early childhood education. What are some of the things that hold us back from the American dream? Accessing education, accessing that economic mobility. That could be cost. Cost can be money, and it can also be time. It could also be the fact that it's competing with something else in your life, which is raising a family. Workers all over Ohio and in the United States are asking, I would like to work, but who's going to take care of my kids? And when you don't have access to childcare, you do. You take care of your kids. And that's hyper-individualized care. That's one-on-one, that's one-on-two, that's one-on-three. It's not efficient for our society. It's not efficient for our economy. And just as much as childcare matters to them, all of Ohio's workers, and we hear about it from the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, and you guys might have been talking to some in the Ohio Chamber of Commerce because I think they're very interested in this issue. It also matters to you, those who work in this industry, because how can you work in childcare and early childhood education if you don't have access to childcare in your profession? You've got a great advocate in Director Wente. She's thinking about these things. I've had conversations with her, and with Governor DeWine. This might be the most early childhood governor that's ever existed in the state of Ohio, and I think you know that. And I don't want to overpromise or say that they've got a solution to everything, but I think that they have the head, she has her head in the right place and has the right strategies. So I'm optimistic about that. But that alone is not enough. I want to share something that I've observed again and again as chancellor, and something that comes up often when I'm speaking to groups, and that's broken labor markets. Not a month goes by in which I don't get invited to an association, whether it's the accountants or manufacturers or truck drivers, or I'm just trying to think of all the different ones that have approached me within the past 9 months that I've been chancellor and said, we really need a scholarship program for our particular industry. We can't find enough talent. And this is particularly a problem when we have a historically low unemployment, which is what we have right now nationally and in Ohio. But really, fundamentally, what's going on is that there's a broken labor market. Because if we can pay people what they are worth, then they would stay in that profession. And this is particularly a problem, in my observation, with third-party payers systems. So where the government pays, an insurer pays, federal government's got a reimbursement rate or something like that, it's artificially holding back the wages, typically in that industry, and there's high turnover. So this is a problem. So often when they come to me, my tough news to them is pay your workers more if you can, that's what they really want. But if you cannot do that, and there's certain markets that are just going to be broken, and they kind of fundamentally are, and we can't fix it with a magic wand in government, we have to think about what are the creative strategies that we can do that can make it a little bit better, that can give people that career path so that they can have that American dream. Because as long as they have that upward mobility, they're going to stay. They're going to have a path. This is fair to them. So many people in higher education have said, well, why are early childhood programs shrinking? Why are institutions not offering them as much or guiding students away from them? And it is wage outcomes. And there's so much pressure on this right now. And I talk about it. I actually talk to the colleges about focusing on the wage outcomes because the declining confidence higher education is related directly to that. People want to know that there's a return on investment. If they doubt that, if college is for everyone and it doesn't result in what they think it's going to result in, then they start telling each other, don't go to college. Just get a short-term certificate. Just go work in a factory, whatever it is. But I can tell you from the labor market data, Bureau of Labor Statistics, the fastest growing jobs in the future require some education beyond high school, period. And 2/3 of the labor market is baccalaureate or higher. Please come in. And so we know that over a lifetime, students need to have that economic mobility. So can we get them on a path that leads to, and that goes to the law that I talked about previously, because if somebody's a working adult, they can't afford to just take time off and go to school, They're working, they're raising a family, they need to get their education while working and while getting paid. So we've got to find those little problems that we have, those barriers, where we have a law that says you can't be paid while you do this, or we don't have apprenticeships for teachers, but now we do. And we've got to fund those things, we've got to support them, we've got to create the networks with the mentors and the people that do all the stuff to make that happen, and the pathway to make sure that they're actually there, that the opportunities are there, enough of them for the students. When we create smooth pathways, it helps. That's basically what I'm saying. Think of it as a friction problem. Think of it as going from A to B, and there's some friction point along the way, and you tell us about what the friction point is, and we help break down the wall. So I don't know your sector as well as you know it, clearly. I'm not a subject matter expert on every topic that comes before higher education. But what I want you to do, and what I want to challenge you to do, is communicate with my office about what barriers you see and when you see them, and how you think that we could break them down. If you see something that doesn't make sense, like the law that existed that said that student teachers couldn't be paid, somebody has to ask the question, why do we have this? Because honestly, it'll just stay in law until you question it and somebody decides to delete it. And we did it, and it wasn't that hard. And it's one thing, but there's other things that we can do. So when we fix this for you and for your sector, when we fix these kinds of problems, we do something else. We help all those other Ohioans who want their version of the American dream to happen. We make that possible because their kids can be cared for and they can get in the workforce. And that's what you do every day. That's what I talk about in higher education, is keeping the American dream alive for people. I feel like we're at a moment right now where people think, is the American dream alive? Can I do better off than my parents did? And I want the answer to be yes to that, and I want you to be a part of that solution. We have to do this for our kids, and we have to do it for our state. I hope you have a great conference. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm not a subject matter expert. I said I wasn't going to do this. I told you that I was not going to answer questions, but I'd be happy to talk to you just a little bit if you do have some questions. Well, thank you very much. Have a great morning. You let me off easy.